Do what thou will be the whole piece of law.
Welcome back. Or if this is your first time, welcome. If it is your first time, you've picked a little bit of a odd time to join. It is a time of transition, and I'm hoping to make my way through it unscathed, or as unscathed as I can be, given the circumstances. Those major life changes are creating a lot of pressure, and the videos are going to be a bit lower effort, by which I mean they're probably mostly going to be auditory experiences. AKA, you listen with your ears, put it on a second monitor, go do something, let me serenade you while I'm not the main focus of your attention. That will probably go through first week of March, and then we'll be back on our normal schedule. There's a poll that I posted Wednesday of this week, if you're watching this when it's uploaded or close to it, that asks you what you would prefer from this trying time, because unfortunately this channel is not my top priority, so it had to give some time. But now that you understand this, that this is second monitor or go do your chores type commentary, let me bring you into what we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be the second part of Francis E. Deck's quote-unquote United States rant. Now, who is Francis E. Deck? Francis E. Deck is a man, allegedly, who lived in the 1920s to about 1980, early 1990. Insane, schizophrenic man who believed the computer god controlled the world. Now, if you look at our world today, you may be convinced that he was correct, and you're 70% right. If you exclude all of the nasty things he was very prone to spewing a lot of the time, he foresaw a lot of things in our modern world that we might have taken for granted in the 1980s. This is arguably, depending on what type of person you are or what your political beliefs are, this may be another instance of that, but I would disagree. Now you may ask why, but I think it's better if I let Francis explain himself, as the beginning of this second part, which I believe you should go watch the first part unless you are chronologically challenged or don't care, at which point I'll let Francis lead us into the second part as he starts, quote, Allstate Insurance Sears Company from its beginning, quote-unquote, gifts judiciary with luxury vacations for kosher justice. After a couple minutes in the said district attorney's office, I demanded to be taken to the suppositive grand jury. The district attorney gangsters told me I had no rights and that I was under arrest. I turned to the besweated and trembling Ginny gangster Franculata, chief district attorney, and requested to be called to any grand jury hearing of said matter. Mafia Franculata, in his simple Ginny accented speech, agreed, and then quickly ran from the room, ramming his shoulder against the door jamb. Parentheses, the usual cowardly, deadly, dangerous, lowly Ginny. End parentheses. I was never notified of the no records? Secret grand jury hearing indicting me. My legal objections were ripped up and thrown in the wastebasket in front of me. Parentheses, provocation death trap, like all of my court appearances, even later in the United States Supreme Court, end parentheses. For many decades, the computer god authorized criminal law mandated immediate dismissal of all indictments pending a new grand jury with the accused present. When the district attorney delays bringing the accused to trial over a month, Franculata, Mafia Ginny district attorney delayed my trial for nearly a year while silencing, with threats of death, all of my potential witnesses. Oh yes, that's where we were. In case you are uninformed, this is a second part to a rant that is actually a second part to a legal case that is explained in this video up here. If you don't want to take the break to watch it, I'm not going to go over and explain it again because he's basically going to overwrite any information that I'm going to tell you, or just go watch the first video because I give you a very light introduction. I'm just going to continue with whatever Francis tells you here, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong, at least. Why it is not as accurate as it could be, I guess, is the nicest way to say it. First, he goes to bat against Allstate Insurance Company. Now, very simple. This is a large conglomerate. Francis E. Deck loves large conglomerates because they are ripe for computer god control, as we've seen in our modern day, relating to modern Supreme Court judges, gifts to the judiciary involving luxury vacations are a great way to get the the verdicts you so desire, which is what Francis accuses Allstate of doing here. And he also brings up his arch nemesis, Frank Gulata, District Attorney for Nassau County. Now, I've had a couple public and private discussions with people who know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two, for going with the insurance company analogies, about whether Frank Gulata knew about Francis E. Deck's virulent hatred of him. And my favorite interpretation is that Frank Gulata succeeds and is aware of Francis E. Deck's writings because he's not making them private. He's throwing them all over, mailing them to wherever, most definitely mailing them to Nassau County officials and, if you believe his own writings, U.S. presidents. So I like to believe Frank Gulata is fully aware of Francis E. Deck melting down in his tiny little house on 29 Maple Avenue, which has long since been bulldozed, and just kind of laughing at him like, oh, look at this man. Look how far he's fallen because he lost one legal case, literally dominated so hard, lives rent-free in his head for like the rest of eternity because Frank Gulata will be mentioned in so many of these rants. And I think he's the only reason why people even remember his name nowadays. Because I don't think you could go to anyone on the street who could name Frank Gulata or Francis E. Deck independently of each other. Except maybe Frank Gulata's kids. But anyway, he's contesting the grand jury hearing here, which is something that he wanted to contest in the legal case that the state was having none of, the Supreme Court was having none of. As a spoiler, in case you didn't go watch that video, he lost all of his appeals. He's not making it out of this. I'm sad that YouTube didn't pilot their naming their videos different things tester until after that video had already been released, because I would have loved to name that video How to Throw Away Your Life for $400 or something along those lines. It was, oh boy, it's such a good video. Please go watch it. I spent so much time on it. But anyway, he's contesting a grand jury hearing that he basically went to Frank Gulata and he said, hey, I know there may be something against me. If there is, let me know so I can be present at the grand jury hearing. Frank Gulata says, okay, and then doesn't tell him. Basically waits 6 months until he forgets about it and then does it, according to Francis. And in this portrayal, it seems more of Francis mentally dominating this man, which I've been growing more to the narcissist angle. So I feel like I'm seeing it all through the narcissist lens. But it's the narcissist, oh yeah, I'm dominating this weak-minded district attorney. He's exhibiting all of these signs of being cowardly and lowly and a fraud and all these other things. I'm dominating him so hard with my mental aura. I'm bearing my aura so hard he just has to leave the room and do this in secret. And then he says, oh, everything that I put forward was ripped up, and it's just a death trap, so I shouldn't have gone anyway, because they're just going to make fun of me in open court. And he makes a weird appeal to some legal precedent. The sentence of, for many decades, the computer god authored criminal law mandated immediate dismissal of all indictments pending new grand jury hearing with the accused present. I feel like that's something that he's trying to say the computer god is going against U.S. law by saying, oh, I had to be there, but they didn't let me know to be there, which means that grand jury is null and void and the rest of it is fruit of the poison tree, so you can't use it, and I should be able to walk free with my $400 that I scammed this woman for out of her insurance claim / divorce case. But I'm getting ahead of myself. He puts the blame for this squarely on Frank Gulata, delaying the trial for nearly a year, which I will give Francis one crumb of achievement here, where Frank Gulata, at least of what we know outside of Francis's cases, is a very strict person when it comes to picking his juries and making sure everything goes off without a hitch. Not in a gangster way, but more in like a very precise Japanese style way. You know how the Japanese court system is a 99% conviction rate because everyone squares all their T's and dots all their I's? I feel like that's the Frank Gulata style, because the one case we know him for outside of Francis, he whittled down a jury pool of like 512 people down to a jury of 16, which is an insane jury selection process. And he wasn't in this case personally, but I feel that went into it because, as I kind of explained in the larger Supreme Court video, when you're dealing with someone who is mentally unwell or trying to represent themselves, which even though Francis is doing in this case, he's still a lawyer, so he's like 50% power of a lawyer you would just hire, but they always try and give you extra wiggle room if you're representing yourself, because they don't want your appeals to go through. They want to show they, crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. So it's just a feeling that I have that Frank Gulata kind of overseeing this case, even though he's not directly prosecuting it, is just making sure, giving that little personal touch that Francis is going to not be able to appeal this in any sort of way, which really does get under his skin, even though he's a lawyer and should know that this is coming. And he says he silenced all of his potential witnesses, maybe because he didn't call any witnesses. So he's saying, oh, he silenced all my witnesses. That's why I couldn't call any witnesses, not because there wasn't anyone on my side, but because Frank Gulata threatened to kill them all. But anyway, he's going to go into Elizabeth Virschning's confession. By the way, when I say kosher woman, he's using a lot harsher words, but just know he's referring to Elizabeth Virschning, the woman that he convictedly stole money from. So he will continue, quote, "My trial for said kosher woman tiny $400 injury claim fraud lasted 1 month in spite of the trial judge and assistant district attorney screaming and ordering me to shut up while I was cross-examining her. The kosher woman repeatedly broke down and admitted she hired me as her lawyer, signing my retainer, and that she repeatedly visited my office and I, also her house, in reference to said injury claim. She even broke down and admitted that I was watching as she stated her $400 injury claim to the Allstate insurance company doctor as he examined her body for said injuries in his office. The trial judge and assistant district attorney, in nearly continuous promptings, aided the kosher woman to make short statements that she knew nothing about me and the said injury claim that she made for $400. United States type trial with gangster parroting puppet stooge jury. Throughout the trial, the jury sneered that I would be guilty. I was sentenced to 15 years hard labor in felony prison by these United States computer god untouchable to be burned alive Frankenstein earphone radio deadly gangsters who set me up for undetectable extermination all my life. Thereafter, no experience, very little training, no law office, Paul Widlet's kosher disease. The computer god repeatedly promoted the Chief Justice Supreme Court for his several years of lowly, deadly felony crimes against me in his kosher courts. Said kosher disease, Paul Widlet's, had me handcuffed in his courtroom, sneered and cackled, stating that I, Francis E. Deck, was a menace to these United States, and that he volunteered to be the judge and to change my sentence, to be put away for good, for life, to once and for all shut up all my complaining. Paul Widlet's, sneering and giggling, sentenced me to life imprisonment in maximum security insanity prison. Even most of you parroting puppet gangster slaves know that maximum security insanity prison for life means frontal lobe brain removal, namely living death lobotomization by the to be burned alive in a public square with their white uniforms deadly gangster medical profession. I gotta cut him off because he's about to go down the drain. But let's explain, maybe in a little more detail, why all of this that he's saying is transpiring. So this case lasted a month, and he, in the case, likes to claim that this is Frank Gulata's meddling, but it actually just makes a lot of sense considering there's a lot of holidays when this trial is being done. I believe at the beginning of November, because it's some holiday at the beginning of November. I'm forgetting. It's like 4 a.m, even though that's like the equivalent of 6 at night for an equivalent schedule, but whatever. He first of all demeans the worth of the trial. He's like, this tiny $400 insurance claim, and it lasted a month for some unknown reason. And when the trial judge and district attorney are screaming and ordering me to shut up, I don't find that as malicious, mainly because there's a lot of weird details in Francis's appeal. We don't have the actual court manuscript. If you know how, please let me know or talk to me, because I've been down that rabbit hole a couple times. But anyway, when they're telling him to shut up and they're like, oh, when I was cross-examining her, she broke down and admitted that she hired me and basically said everything that I wanted her to, when the court documents are 900 pages long. I don't know how much that is in the grand scheme of things. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how much your average trial documents are. But I do know that the cross-examination of Elizabeth Virschning, aka the kosher woman, is 90 pages out of that 900. So 1/10 approximately of the entire court case that lasts a month is the cross-examination of Elizabeth Virschning by Francis E. Deck. And it sounds like she's just saying whatever will get it over with faster, because it sounds like in the trial documents that the state and the judge and everyone involved is basically begging Francis to stop, because he's effectively just spinning his tires, doing nothing, making no headway, establishing no points, and making a nightmare out of everyone involved's lives until it ends. The reason why the trial takes so long isn't their fault, it's his fault, because he's so incompetent and can't establish any of his points or make any headway in the case, because all of his evidence is forged or doesn't exist. He's only responding to defense witnesses. He has no witnesses, and he'll state, oh, that's because they're all intimidated by the parroting puppet gangster district attorney Frank Gulata. But that's probably because he really didn't have any witnesses, because they were all made up. I cannot think of one single person that would be on his side about this. As a convicted forger, fraud, and check launderer... That's Jerry Ford, my bad. But he basically says, oh, she sits down and confirms everything that I wanted her to. And then the jury, in spite of hearing all this super convincing evidence that they were on my side 100% of the time, all the time, they sneered at me that I would be guilty. They said that I wouldn't do anything positive. They sentenced me to 15 years hard labor. And I'm curious as to what to be burned alive means in his pejorative spam. Because to me, it kind of reads as like a public pariah thing, like they're making a martyr of me, or they're making a pariah of me, effectively, or they're making a pariah of something. I'm thinking like the witches being burned in public type thing. And he then lays into Paul Widlitz, who actually has a verbal history on some site. I'll link it in the description. It's a very nice listen to if you have the time, where he talks about his career and the area that he lives in, and he just throws him under the bus. He says, oh yeah, very little training, no law office, that he repeatedly promoted a chief judge of the Supreme Court for several years of lowest deadly felony crimes against me. And if Francis is being truthful here and he's not breaking down again, if he's called a public menace, I would believe it. Mainly because of all the stated things. If you haven't been listening the entirety of this series, I feel like you wouldn't agree with me, but if you have been listening, I feel like you'd agree with me if you would call Francis E. Deck a menace to society, because I would. And he's like, oh, I'll finally shut you up for good. And he sentenced me to life imprisonment and maximum security insanity prison, which honestly, if you take it out of Francis's coded language and put it into this man sees a menace to society and believes that he can be fixed, quote unquote, it's kind of a little benevolent. But of course, this is the time where if you go to a mental institution, you get lobotomized, because that's just the best way to check people out of life, to let them wind down effectively. It's the cure-all for everything from hysteria to schizophrenia. Just get lobotomized. And it gives a little more of a 3D look to when he says Frankenstein living death slavery, which is these people who have had their brains removed, stitched out, lobotomized, no higher critical thinking skills, walking around doing the computer god's bidding, walking and talking like normal people, but there's death on the inside of their eyes. They don't see out. They can only mimic life, never truly be alive. It's like those pictures of people you see before and after the lobotomy. You're like, oh, that was certainly a time to be alive. But I'm just gonna let Francis go off for the rest of the rant because he doesn't say really much anything of substance. It's just great to watch him implode because that's what he's going to do for the rest of this rant. So I'll let him implode, we'll wrap it out. It'll be nice. I hope you've been enjoying the more laid-back style. If you do, please let me know. Like, comment, and subscribe. But just know there will be higher effort in the future. This is a temporary thing, but if you like it, I guess stick around for the next few weeks, because this is what it's going to be. I'll let Francis continue to melt down by saying, quote, "Handcuffed and in a cage, I was driven to maximum security imprisonment. I will never forget. And I will never forgive these untouchable computer god, deadly parroting puppet, believe in nothing, deadly gangsters to be burned alive in a public square. Even you, parroting puppet gangster slave, know that throughout the United States, the computer god controlled United States government throughout United States gives secret, fabulous, felonious bribe pay to each and every kosher. From 2 times cops weekly pay to every kosher penny candy store operator, to even astronomical minimum of 3 times cops weekly pay to every newly licensed untouchable deadly gangster kosher doctor, psychometrist, and dentist. Sure, U.S. Salem secret pride gangster communism. Even you, parroting puppet, know that throughout United States there are no kosher in this lowly town. Only there kosher mixed race bastards on welfare created by their worldwide kosher god of sodomy and Gomorrah, suckling the private areas adoration for the above lowest gangster crimes against me. Solely the computer god repeatedly promoted Mafia Ginny Frank Gulata to chief gangster judge of the Supreme Court Appellate Division, Monroe Place, Brooklyn, New York, and made quote-unquote Crazy Joe Deck his assistant court clerk many years ago. This is all detailed in my worldwide mailed 8-page communist computer god expose letter. Frankenstein, earphone, radio, parroting, puppet, gangster slave, you will not help me, and you cannot help me. You do not know even one word of pray. Even if you did know one word of pray, you would not say it for me. But the black people will make you wish you did say one word of pray for me, for your only hope for a future. Francis E. Tech, Esquire. Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? These views are not my own. Wow. There you go. That's the satire crown, feds. That's the satire crown. Oh, these views are my own. Wow. My magical, interchangeable, believe-in-nothing computer god gangster phrase that protects me from all living death slavery, causing computer god algorithm, whatever. I'm not trying to do something of this from my own will. Just know that Francis E. Deck really hates a certain group of people, and I don't think it is that hard to tell. I think the one little tiny thing that you may be able to glean from this is possibly that Francis's hatred of his brother stems from his treatment of him, as well as the fact that he's quote-unquote buddying up with Frank Gulata. You may have missed how he said, oh, he made him the assistant court clerk, which we don't know if it's true, but it would not surprise me because Joe, like Francis, is a military veteran, which means that he would be more inclined to take state and federal jobs. But I've heard multiple conflicting things about the progression of Francis's illness. A lot of people say that in his later rants he gets more unhinged and insane. He's a lot more hopeful in the earlier rants when he says, offer one word of pray for me, Francis E. Deck. And now later you can hear him kind of turn on that sentiment where he says, oh, you cannot help me. You don't know one word of pray for me. And even if you did, you wouldn't say it for me. And the only time you'll say it for me is when the regret finally sinks in about the modern talking point of all of these people flooding into the country, and they'll make you wish you had prayed for me, shakes fist at Cloud. But it's messy. It's awful. It's him finally going mask off, even though he's never had a mask this entire time. It's just sad to see him flip out like this, to see him lose hope. Because on the earlier rants, you can see him typing. He's on his back porch. He's like, oh yeah, these chemicals of the typewriter are making me sick, so I have to type outside. But offer one word of prayer for me if you truly want to help me. He doesn't even ask for money. He doesn't even ask for more ink for his typewriter. Well, he asks for a whole manual typewriter at some point for your only hope for a future. By the way, feel free to send me a manual typewriter and I'll send a custom Francis E. Deck ask rant to your house that is completely personalized. If you can find my address, I guess. I'm not telling you. That's not an invitation to go looking either. But screw that pizza nonsense. If anyone, through extra legal means, meaning against my will, finds my address and wants to send me intimidating messages or other intimidating things or call me, save your breath. I don't respond to that well, namely because I won't do anything about it or give you any reaction. If you do, I will type up hundreds of rants with that manual typewriter and send them across the United States like a second Francis E. Deck. How about that, huh? I'll make it everyone's problem. Please don't do that. But that would be super funny if you did. But don't. I'm genuinely saying please don't, because that would be against the law and then we would have to be enemies instead of best friends like we are right now. We can be brothers in computer god gangster slavery. I didn't, endings are hard. I didn't know how to close this one out, mainly because he just flips out and there's nothing really constructive you can say about it. So in conclusion, Francis E. Deck would probably dislike the way that the immigration talk is going right now, and he'd say, well, you should have offered that one word of pray for me, because now these people are making you regret it, shakes fist at Cloud. But anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching, and just as a future thank you to bearing with me during these trying times. If you stick with me, I thank you. If you have to rediscover me after some time when I go back into regular production, I sure hope you come back. I'll miss everyone that leaves. I really wish I could do exit interviews for this channel to know what I could improve on. If you made it this far, please tell me what I could improve on. Watch my old stuff. Tell me. I understand that this is a lower production value time, but that's no excuse to no longer improve after it's done, because then I'll probably be able to get back on a better schedule and, hey, maybe I might have some free time. Budget will go up. There you go. Might make a month of better videos, but I'm always striving to improve. If you have anything you want to say to me, I read everything. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscription, leave anything, honestly. In this economy, you can really only afford to follow your dreams. There's your advice. And that's why I'm here. So, genuinely, thank you, and I'll see you next time.